A lot of times we did a lot of our work, our creativity work, our academic work outside in the classroom, in the playground. And the principal would come and tell me, hey, you got to get your kids back in the classroom. But he didn't know, the principal didn't know because he never asked me. But we were measuring like the height of the shop room by stepping away from it for about 100 paces and measuring it, and then looking at the angle that it made from the point where we were to the top of the roof, and able to calculate how high the building was. We were doing things like that, 8th grade. And you know what? They learned their math. They learned their reading and writing. They learned how to think. They learned how to defend themselves. They learned.
The affidavit says I would not review the test with anyone. And I didn't review the test with anyone. I was all by myself. So do you want to hear what the problem is on the test that you've given to thousands of kids and you're about to score that's going to have an incorrect question on it? And he said, well, no, that would have to go through channels. And I said, well, I tried to go through the channels that you told me to go through. He said, well, maybe that we'll have the math person contact your testing coordinator and find out what the detail was of the math question that you found the problem with. And that never happened. And so the state never did find out what the problem was on the test. But the next year when the manual came out and the affidavit was in, the affidavit now says that you will not review the test with anyone or alone. So that is my contribution to the testing system and my effect upon standardized tests.
Having read the Writing Without Teachers, I came into the next class having written out what my students later called my composition manifesto. And in my composition manifesto, I said, well, starting today, we're all going to write. And this is how we're going to write, and we're all going to meet in small groups after we've written our pieces, and this is how we're going to get responses to our pieces of writing. And that's what we're going to do for this composition for Teachers of English class. And once we've done it, then we'll reflect on it and see where it got us, and see whether or not it made sense to us as writers, first of all. And then we'll ask, does this make sense in terms of a way of thinking about writing instruction?
When you sit outside of the circle and you realize that your students can lead quite a nice conversation without you. And again, that's one of those things that we need to keep learning, that there's a lot going on in these children's heads and that we don't necessarily have to be directing everything all the time. So I would say that's one thing, one advantage, is that you'll be amazed at the potential of your children, potentials that you may never have realized if you were more in control of it.
So I just loaded up with armfuls of paperbacks and went into class. This was after the first quarter when I figured things were kind of calm and they weren't going to be too nosy about what I was doing. And I had put candles on the windowsills, and I made a really soft, quiet environment. We had, the lights were out, and I came in, I had this cape, and I came in with this mystery bag of books. I mean, they were in a bag under my arm, and I had the cape, and so I was pulling books out and doing book talks in the candlelight, and trying to, talk about, people in the beatnik era, how they got together at city lights and it was dark, and people were wondering, well, what are you reading, and what are you reading, and what are you writing? And so I would pull these books out, and I got everybody to read. We were reading things they'd never heard of and things that I'm sure weren't on the approved list. but they were reading, and one of the best books that got selected was Edward Albee's The Sandbox. I mean, you know, who teaches that anymore? But it was wonderful for that year. And how about Sartre's No Exit? You know, like, it would take years to get a permission to bring those guys into the classroom. And it did take years. I mean, I was teaching in the 70s when they finally got him in the classroom. So anyway, those are silly moments. I don't know, it was just fun. And I miss that part. A startup, you know, doing a startup in your classroom and going off script, because I'm really good at going off script.
Nutty to have somebody come and teach in a school and not know the city they're in. They don't even know the neighborhood. You know, they don't even walk around and look at it. They don't know anything about it. And it's true. I really feel that way, that you ought to, teachers who go into a school building ought to walk around the neighborhood and get familiar with what's going on there. And drop into the local grocery store or whoever. Why? Because your students come with all of that there. And look, I'm in Oakland in the 60s. I came there in 57, I think. It was a time of tremendous turmoil. And knowing what the students were bringing to class and the experiences they are having out in the city itself were ways of appreciating what was going on. I don't know. I liked that. Now, if you keep saying why, after a while I'll just have to say, you know, I did it because I liked it and I learned from it.
The best advice I could give to a new teacher coming into the field is to learn every student's name within the first week. I make it my mission on the first day of school that I can identify every kid by first name, last names I get later, but I can identify them by first name. With my seating chart, I don't alphabetize them, I don't organize them, I let them sit where they want, and I encourage them to switch around so it keeps me on my toes. And that's the best advice I could give, is being able to call out a student by name instead of, hey, you. It comes off a lot better as, Jessica, Brian, I need you over here now, instead of you. And I remember the students every year are very surprised that I've taken the time to learn their name, and that when they come in to check out a book, I'm like, all right, Chris. And then he's like, how do you know my name? I was like, Chris Dayton, we hang out together. What do you mean I don't know your name? You've learned my name. And he's like, none of my other teachers know my name. And I'm like, it's the second day of school, man. We got to know these things. And we just go from there. But I think that would be the greatest strength you can bring into the classroom, is taking the time to learn the names.
And so, in a roundabout way, my story would be, I got into the classroom, and I've only taught at the high school level, and I've only taught schools that are poor schools. And I don't even remember what I said to the student. I don't even remember the student's name. I don't even remember whether the student was male, female, black, brown, yellow, red, or purple. But I spoke to that student in the direct way that I'd been used to speaking to the people at my work. And the hurt that I saw in that student's eyes changed me forever as a person. And I realized that my previous career had lacked heart, and that if I was going to be a teacher, that I was going to have to open myself up not only to the pain of my students, but my own pain as well.
How important is a sense of community to a student in their learning process? Well, I think the answer is painfully obvious. If a student is comfortable and feels secure, they're going to be so much readier to learn. We know we know it's important that they not be hungry and that they not be fearful. And there was a lot of fearfulness because it wasn't necessarily a friendly community to a kid that had come in from a small class with one teacher and the same students, being precipitated into a big school with lots of kids and strangers in every class and lots of teachers to get used to. And so that doesn't provide a sense of community. But when you meet the staff, the people in charge of things, on a personal, close-up basis, then you begin that sense of community.
And I guess that was my lesson, that writing can be everything to some kids, especially those who don't feel as if they have a voice. They do have a voice on paper that can be translated, heard, read, and understood by others who will give them feedback and love back and the power to go on till they can stand again on their own 2 feet and speak with their own voice and not just pen to paper. For me, it helped because I was so angry. And to have a situation where you're not instructing a certain individual, I just learned a lot of lessons from that episode. So even though it's sad and one of the worst episodes I can imagine, it still did teach me a lot about the power of writing and how you can use writing to heal.
One of the boys in the front raised his hand. I said, yeah, so what is it? And this is a boy who never got a grade higher than a C-, and he worked really, really hard. Many learning differences, and we mainstream all of our students in theology. So he said, he raised his hand, he said, Mr. Megan, I learned I'm not stupid. I said, Mark? He says, I have something that I can use to really think now, and I'm not stupid. And you know, he got a B+ in the class, and he earned it, and on one writing assignment, he rewrote it 8 times. So that was probably one of the most powerful stories, and I tell that to every workshop that I give. I tell that to all my classes at the beginning of the year, that none of us are stupid. Sometimes we just don't have the right tools.
What I would like to see is a drastic revision in the curriculum so that in the upper years of high school we have multiple disciplinary elective programs where we lay out major issues that students are going to face in the future and teach them how to address those issues in some intelligent way, how to go through problem-solving exercises, how to define the issues, what they are, what the consequences are of the issues, so that we turn out people who are not necessarily able to resolve these problems, but people who are more informed as an electorate than we seem to have at present. And as I say, that's my main concern, because my grandkids are going to be inheriting a lot of problems that we're not facing right now in the schools.
I get close to the end and one girl goes, you know, I only did about 2 sentences, Ms. G. I didn't give it my best shot. I can't take even a 7. I think you're going to have to give me about a 2. I said, okay, thanks. I write the 2, and another hand goes up. And a girl says, you know what? I know I already gave you my grade, but she's right. Mine is too short. I didn't do my best job. That's important to know, I respond. Erase. Put the much lowered grade in. 2 or 3 kids lowered their own grades. And when they were done, one of the students said, another hand goes up, and I'm thinking, oh Lord, another. He says, you know what? I think we need to give them a round of applause for what they just did. And their peers applauded. Because we have decided no handful of points is worth your honor. Those are kids. And they'll come through for you.
Maybe I should just leave this footnote, however. My worst days of teaching, and I had them, I would go home and I would say, I don't want to do this anymore. Now, in fact, I never want to go back to the classroom again as long as I live. On the other hand, on my best days, I would go home and I would think, or I would say to my spouse or my friends, you know, there's probably nothing I could have chosen in this life that has given me greater satisfaction, nothing that I wanted to do more, and how lucky I am to be placed in this particular situation to be able to do it. To sustain that for a career, the only thing I had to remember on those worst days was the best days.